Hello and good morning. Welcome to the Space Madness podcast. This is your host, Jeff Nasanov. Um, Episode 6, Getting Up There with Etana Jacobson. And as I always do, I'm going to give a brief but cheesy introduction. Space Madness podcast, so named because space exploration is a maddening thing to do. And I'm sure that our guest today will have stories of that nature in her field as well. Probably no less maddening, if not more, in Hollywood and the filmmaking world. So, good morning, Itana, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Jeff. Great to be here with you.
Thank you. So, why don't you tell us about a little bit about yourself and your journey, and then I'll jump in with how we got to know each other.
Great. Well, you've known me a while, but you pronounced my name exactly right, which is always welcome. So I'm Etana Jacobson. I'm a director and a producer based in Los Angeles, originally from the East Coast. And I tend to work in STEM-driven entertainment. And I started out working for Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich back in the day on some of their sci-fi adventures. They're probably still best known for Independence Day, but I came on sometime after that and just got swept away into their really wonderfully crafted worlds. And went to UCLA Film School and just made a film called Advanced Chemistry, which is based on accurate science, and it's hit top three on Stars. And we beat some franchise blockbusters the week of our premiere. We beat the latest Hunger Games and John Wick 4 and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we're excited. And we are worldwide now. We're on every continent. We are broadcasting on Stars. So it's a very fun, light, modern. It's a take on it's basically a modern Midsummer Night's Dream based on accurate neurobiology of love. And did that.
Cool.
UCLA scientists were our senior advisors. So the new project is One Mars, which also has some fabulous science advisors. And one of them we know very well, Jackie Green. And so it's basically an adventure. I'm avoiding some of the absolute specifics because it's all based on industry leading science of
Mhm.
getting to Mars. And I think the public doesn't know this. I didn't know this, but I first heard about this at a science film event at UCLA. Actually heard Jackie and her late husband Roger speak, and an incredible team about getting to Mars, terraforming Mars. And I was like, wait a minute, is this real? Because I'd been pitching to Star Trek at that point. I was working and things like that came up a lot, and they were always straight up sci-fi. And I thought, these aren't actual scenarios, but they are. And I was like, public taxpayer money's not going to them, is it? Which is interesting. And it's like, yes, they are. And I was like,
Mhm.
well, maybe the public should know about this. I'd like to know about this. And it just started this incredible, wonderful love affair with specifically Mars and terraforming, aeroforming planets, comets, space colonies, and that I think the public should know and would love to know real steps are being taken, not just by tech bros who are great or maybe great. It may be debatable how great they are, but not just
Sure.
like, yeah, might vary on a lot of factors, but it's not just certain individuals, and but it's like every major space agency that I'm aware of, this
Mhm.
sort of scenario are pushing people out there, and we are looking at like late 2026 having
Mhm.
SpaceX send 5 uncrewed heavy, I guess they're Falcon Heavy rockets will be going
Mhm.
out. Those come back successfully. 2029 will be a crewed mission. So that's right around the corner. And this project is set up, this film is set up to align with that, synchronize with that. So it's just a really
Mhm.
thrilling opportunity.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and that is a really exciting kind of combination of events, whether it's the actual journey or the storytelling. Particularly as we speak, the NASA budget is in a sort of disarray as it is being debated between the White House and the Congress, and so it's getting a lot of attention actually. And you mentioned a couple things to follow up on. You mentioned terraforming as a technology for the future. That is in that is a lot of space agencies have research efforts for longer time horizon, higher risk, higher cost projects as part of a portfolio of exploration technologies. And I don't, again, like you said, that's something that a lot of I think a lot of Americans don't know about. And to mention Jackie, so for the audience, Jackie is was my mentor and manager at JPL. I basically owe everything I've done in space to her guidance and leadership. And you, of course, knew her, and that's how we met probably 10 plus years ago at JPL. So you want to give Jackie a little bit of a plug here.
Yeah, so we can't plug Jackie enough, and hopefully a future episode we will all be on together, and I'm sure you and her have tons to talk about as well. And yeah, this really sparked her research, and her research with her late husband Roger Kern really just ignited such a fire in me, such awareness of what was happening with NASA, with JPL NASA, with NASA Goddard, the Science Visualization Center, which maybe we'll touch on. She just really started, I think, the spark of maybe the biggest my life's project at this point. Like, and helped so many UCLA film students the same way, and just so it's wonderful to have both spanned these sectors of really assisting you there at NASA, and then me at UCLA and at NASA. I was able to come in and consult at NASA in film, media, television, game outreach, also through Jack. I think that's the first time you and I might have met.
Yes.
And just being there at NASA and seeing the high bay with like the rovers being built was really a thrill. Just to make it real. And I really want to share excitement with the public. I think the public needs to go into JPL, go into various stations, and I don't think the public even has a sense of like the scope. I didn't, and I love this space. I was like pitching Star Trek regularly. I was working heavily in the science fiction space most of my life, but until I really got to know Jackie and also the Sloan Foundation, I'm a directing fellow for making scientifically accurate, STEM-driven films. And I just actually find the audience can tell when something's authentic, and the interest in something like Interstellar, and I see One Mars as like really legacy of like The Martian meets Interstellar meets a bit of Avatar, like it's deep world building based on accurate science, and audiences can feel it even if they don't understand tech whatever. They can just feel when something's authentic. So
it's kind of like that feeling as an audience member when you feel like you're being respected by the filmmakers. One of the things that, I mean, I realize I'm not a typical audience member, and I probably have a lower tolerance for this kind of thing, but I really get taken out of the storytelling experience when let's say a rule of the universe, of the plot universe, is just broken or ignored. And to me it's like when a human being or when a character behaves in a way that makes no sense. Similarly, it just breaks the immersion and the illusion for me that is so powerful, when it works. So, and of course that challenge of keeping all those things straight, all those juggling balls, going in circles, that's a real challenge. And the Hollywood system probably does a better job of communicating that than NASA itself does, frankly. And so it's an interesting thing from inside NASA back when I was to see the public respond to both what NASA does and what Hollywood does. So
and I think the public isn't necessarily aware of so much that NASA does, and there is a lot of PR on private space agencies launching, and man, we can unpack that. But like, it's all really positive. Like getting us into space is positive. I mean, how public tax dollars are allocated, that's the question of the moment. But I think just getting into space, a positive human future, that's something we all want. And a lot of the technologies, the STEM that we're exploring to get into space and to live in space is something that we can use now today on Earth, and we are.
Yes. Yeah, and I really like that point, because when I talk to people in NASA and the space industry over the years, and obviously I love to talk, I always like to ask people what motivated them. And for some of them it was an astronaut visiting their classroom. Some of them it was understanding the impact on medical science from space exploration that might have helped someone in their family, or so on. And there are so many examples of that that are really not communicated well from NASA itself, and Hollywood has done a good job actually, comparatively, especially in communicating that leadership and that value. So I'm curious how, growing up, how that interplay, motivated you and affected you. What space exploration events were really impactful in your early years and going forward.
I'd have to say, apart from Star Wars, which is,
Hmm.
and I've been really blessed and excited to work within the Star Wars universe. I've worked on a number of Star Wars games, and
Hmm.
I've been lucky enough to be flown up to LucasArts at the
Oh,
Presidio
cool.
and just like play with some toys up there and meet some great
Hmm.
people there. And I worked in video games as well as film a long time,
Hmm.
and now they're really converging in some interesting ways, which maybe we'll get time to get into all
Sure.
this multimedia.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, the Star Wars universe has meant a lot to me. Um, yeah, it was obviously Princess Leia was always such a fabulous feminist
Hmm.
hero, and I never expected to go that deep in the universe as such. I mean, I played some, I'll geek out here. I played some role playing Star Wars modules as a kid, and they were
Uh-huh.
a blast. They're particularly fun. But I actually got to like create within that universe for LucasArts. I got to create like a cousin of Han Solo's having an adventure and like off Corellian. And anyway, there
That's
was just
cool.
some very fun things. So I would say that really fired me up. And I just like sort of peripherally know like Katie Rose, who doesn't always like one of the George Lucas's daughters, and
Hmm.
she's a filmmaker and does some really fascinating work. And um, I've gotten direction from him on certain things. So that's
Hmm.
been really fulfilling and exciting. But beyond that, there's so much. I absolutely love science fiction, but I'm even more interested in science faction.
Sure.
Um, and I think Ridley Scott's meant a lot to me.
Hmm.
And I think The Martian is a great film. I've seen it easily 10 times, and there's so few films you really can just watch again and again. And it's brilliant, brilliant film. He's a terrific filmmaker. And Contact, I have to say, Carl
Hmm.
Sagan and Druyan's Contact, that has been so formative. And the protagonist, the main character, she's a strong yet flawed scientist who becomes
Hmm.
given away, but something of an action hero in a very realistic, grounded way in One Mars. I'd say Ellie Arroway from Contact is the closest comp. Um,
Okay.
and I think Jodie Foster did such a great job with that. And um, I am like loosely, I'm friends with some folks in her circle. Long
Oh,
story. So
cool.
there's a chance maybe she'll hear this, and that would be pretty
Yeah.
fascinating. Um, yeah, so uh, I'd say those really were formative for me, and just power of imagination, just seeing what is possible, what kind of futures are envisioned. And I'd say like of anybody really, Carl Sagan and Druyan, like they're that
Yeah.
um, the Wanderers, the NASA Goddard film, I think really nailed it. Anybody who hasn't seen it, I don't know
Hmm.
any people involved with it, but it's a great film that
Hmm.
really harnesses that spirit of exploration, that human desire to explore and wander that I think is spine tingling. And we want to be aware of and helping problems on this planet. There are so many, but there is still this human impulse, to go towards a positive human future, to explore. And I think if we can balance those two, we've got something.
Well, yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more on all of those. I'm trying to imagine what it's like to go from watching Star Wars to getting notes from George Lucas. And I imagine the closest thing I can think of is maybe studying NASA and then working for NASA and
Yeah.
finding those same boundaries. I really like the mention of Contact and Carl Sagan. I mean, I grew up watching Carl Sagan also, and all of those other films you mentioned, basically every one of them, after the movie was over, I would go to Wikipedia and read everything I could about the actual science that's being worked with or played with. And I know I'm not the only person that was a really exciting introduction to a lot of concepts. And I think that's one of the powers of storytelling in Hollywood is it can in an engaging way introduce concepts of real science and engineering to an audience who then might go off and learn more about it and maybe realize they have an aptitude for it or a curiosity or a passion even if they don't have an aptitude for it. So I'm moved by that journey and your efforts to keep kind of pushing that pushing that forward. Now, you mentioned the kind of private space industry. That's a really interesting storytelling challenge because I think right now the story that people are getting is not very positive in that it's for wealthy tourists and tech bros. Um, it's interesting from my perspective to watch social media react to things like the Blue Origin launches and all of that. Uh, I'm curious how that changed from NASA leadership to private leadership. How do you see that from a storytelling point of view, and how do you redirect sort of to the larger social good that space exploration can do and has been doing, for 70 years?
Yeah, this is the question, right? Because and this gets into the taxpayer dollars and all the things
Mm,
with the current administration. My understanding, I think we've talked about this, and you would know better than I, but I'll just be blunt. I think NASA's at a point they're very interdependent with SpaceX in particular. And, it's great to accomplish some of the things that they have accomplished and are accomplishing. But I guess we just want to make sure that a lot of, how carefully can you put this right now? Just hope that there's a positive human future for all and that we're all striving towards that. Um, and that we do see reflected a lot of the world that's around us. I literally feel like I'm in a minefield saying almost anything that sounds
sure.
like very basic humanistic ideas, like post-enlightenment
Yeah.
ideas of like democracy. And hopefully,
Sure.
I think things will be kind of balancing to, I think we'll just kind of maybe focus on the joy and wonder, if I can say that, of getting into space. And certainly there's massive international space agencies. I mean,
Hmm.
China, Russia, the European Space Union, I mean, they all have their programs, and we've, just got to make every effort that our like NASA stays vibrant and robust. And
Yeah, it's an interesting. You mentioned the early Star Trek themes, right? The early Star Trek themes that for some are controversial today, which is odd, so many decades later. And from a history of NASA point of view, it's even stranger because uh, the Obama administration had basically catapulted SpaceX to its dominant position
that's right.
with a series of incentives and programs for commercial launch. And now we have what could charitably be called the opposite of the Obama administration, feuding with Elon Musk, while itself is totally dependent on SpaceX for everything from national security launches to human space exploration. So it's a very strange turn of events, particularly this week as we record this. I mean,
Yes.
it's unclear what Elon Musk's continued involvement will be. To say nothing of NASA's on Friday, NASA the nominee for the administrator of NASA, who had been basically picked by Elon Musk, was booted out of consideration, and we don't know who the alternative is going to be. So one of the interesting things about doing this podcast now is all this uncertainty for NASA. Now, some things I like to think about it this way: some things are never going to change, gravity and the chemical energy storage of rocket fuel, and the actual technical challenges, the scientific realities are not going to change. And so one of the that's actually one of the positives I think about trying to tell stories in this area is that overcoming the Earth's gravity is always going to be an inspiring accomplishment and an interesting story. Keeping humans alive out there is always going to be a satisfying and personally meaningful story. Um, so thinking forward to the Mars One project, how are you thinking about that as the actual Mars human exploration in the real world, so to speak, is changing? How do you keep how do you how do you thread the needle of telling your story while trying to remain glued to what's going on?
Yeah, and what a glue it is because I am watching, like, I'm really following the news very closely. I have friends and folks that have worked closely with Elon, even went to college with him in some cases in
Mm,
UPenn. Um, yeah, and then I've worked with him more recently at Tesla and stuff. And mostly, actually, people have been super positive. I'll just say that everyone remembers him
mm,
as pleasant, affable. I mean, I don't want to speak for anybody, but so I guess I've mostly been following the New York Times, and I guess they had something just yesterday that was like going to refocus, retrench on Mars to get.
mm,
So on the one hand, anything that drives this forward, it is the biggest project of humanity, I'd say, at this point, to actually
mm.
get there and sustain humanity there and start even the first steps towards terraforming. This is going to take quite a bit, and it just might need this sort of titanium will to get certain things to go forward. But I know we want, and we briefly discussed, yeah, like a sort of a plurality of humanity and ideas in a
Mm.
democratic kind of shape. This is exactly the topic of the Project One Mars. That it's, are we going to have like recreate the factions on Earth, or do we have an
Mm.
opportunity to have some more unity? And if there is, there, of all things, ancient Celts, people think I'm Irish. I'm not. I'm Jewish, and it's become scary to say that on a podcast. But Celts, I guess, had a saying, unity and diversity, and I've always thought that that was a
Mm.
very interesting model for governance, and for lots of things. So that's really something that's explored on this project. Can we have new forms of governance entirely?
Mm.
We kind of are looking at like corporate colonies there,
Mm.
and even there, are there going to be militarized corporate colonies? And if so, to what extent? And are they going to be kind of have scientists will in some ways become very dominant forces involved with
Mm.
being a national science administrator on Mars at a certain period in the future is going to have a lot of weight to it, a lot of political weight. But so there's just a lot of, so this is exactly what the film's about. And
Yeah,
I see it as the start of like a multi-platform franchise. We're really going to explore this. There's not necessarily going to be any crystal clear one answer. If there's an answer in one
sure.
period, it might shift in another. Um, but one piece is wherever we've gone out, a lot of where humanity's gone out, all kinds of people from all
Mm.
backgrounds. There's a sense of like people do tend to impose, be somewhat ethnocentric, and we can't help
Mm.
it, but
Sure.
we're going to have to kind of cope with. It's interesting. It could lean towards metaphysical. It's not. You can be a devout atheist, and you could
Mm.
be a religious person in the world. But the fact is, these systems, these biological systems, planets,
Mm.
they're going to impose some of their
Yeah.
so without, that's kind of what we explore as well, without giving it away.
So,
Like, yeah, what was
so
that?
I'm really excited by that because one of the things I always wanted to see a Star Trek movie about was how Earth went from, well, so there's basically a gap in the entire Star Trek universe, however canonical you want it, and that's how they actually got to the early Federation where there was a scarcity-free Earth. And I've always thought that was one of the most interesting subjects is what events could actually lead humanity to come together in that way. Now,
Mm,
one of the things I talk about a lot on this podcast is that the space environment forces us to cooperate. It puts us in a survival scenario,
right.
not unlike very early humans in the wild. And as you said, that brings up some behaviors that we might like to be rid of, like ethnocentrism and fear of the other and all that other stuff. But what I think is the history of space exploration has actually shown quite the opposite. That it brings out some of the best in all of us. That think of the shuttle Mir. Think of the Soviets and the astronauts, the cosmonauts and the astronauts coming together in space, even during the height of the Cold War. There's no room for that kind of bickering up there when you have to make sure you have enough air to breathe. So
Right.
when I think about future efforts in other planets, you're either going to have like what China's doing now on the moon, which is entirely Chinese military secretive efforts, and that will have its own sort of leadership format. But again, it will still be mostly driven by the challenges of staying alive, whether you have a Chinese government agency giving you orders or a Silicon Valley startup. By far, the challenge is staying alive and maintaining those resources, and so I really like the science fiction imagining of human sociology on Mars, and how you build how you come up with a story that's believable, compelling, and thought provoking, while acknowledging some of the more challenging aspects of human behavior are going to be present, because it's more important to have enough food to eat than to solve them, and so that should be an interesting fodder for storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, really spanning like world building, franchise
Mm.
spanning, and platform spanning, because
Yes.
some of the effects, we're kind of in a little bit of a shift in effects where for the
Mm.
first LED volume stages are in some ways democratizing effects.
Mm.
In some ways, just giving us these gorgeous worlds that make production a bit easier. Yeah, that's definitely a whole episode.
Interesting. Well, so I'm really interested in that. I recently read that here in Atlanta, there's one of the few. I don't even know what to describe it, but some mind-bogglingly advanced set for just that purpose. I would love to learn more about it, and maybe we have another episode on
Yeah,
those technologies. Um,
that the group
l-
I'm working with, soft partnered with so far, but they
oh,
were Lux Machina, now they're Sweetwater NEP, but
okay.
I'm pretty sure we're talking about the same stage. It's the biggest stage in North America.
Oh, really?
I
Okay.
believe
Here
it's
in
yeah,
Atlanta.
In Atlanta. Yep,
Oh,
and it's
wow.
literally, I think it's called
Well,
yes.
so I was talking with someone at a party over the weekend about the globalization of film production for cost control measures, and I'm
Yep.
sure that's another conversation. But it's interesting to hear that the technology, at least, is still here. So that's good to know. Now, I want to move to the multi-platform nature of of this project, because I've been kind of wondering for decades why isn't there a great film game thing together? And a couple of projects in the last 10 to 15 years seem to be set up that way. There was a game called Destiny, which never ended up having much of a story, and I will criticize that game extensively, because I've been a fan of Bungie software since the 90s when Marathon came out. And if I don't stop myself, I'll talk about Marathon for hours. But Bungie did the for Destiny. They basically had a half half baked story in the game that you then had to go read online, other story components. And to me, that's the least effective way of doing this. And it had that immersion breaking laziness feeling, where it's like, well, we couldn't be bothered to put the story in the game, so go look it up. And given that games and films are now basically using the same special effects technologies, the same 3D modeling and motion capture technologies, it seems like we're really it's a great time to make something like that compelling, that maybe before the movie starts, you're on your phone and interacting with something, or who knows, or
Right.
you have maybe when you buy your ticket, you start getting emails from characters in the story to your real email that, like, I don't know. I could think of all kinds of crazy stuff. And I mean, where do you start with the diversity of formats and experiences that are possible now?
Well, that's it, Jeff. Actually, those are some fun ideas there. And I remember back, hey, but like there were some experiments that were doing just that, sending you like you'd
Hmm.
sign various subscriptions and you'd have like the
Hmm.
game characters email. But that's tremendously fun right there. Yeah, I think I've been having conversations with folks in the game film kind of
Hmm.
space, and I was repped at a group for a while that specialized in that, and so that's some of the people I know that have had some huge successes now with game crossover to film.
Hmm.
So I think that's definitely a big piece of the puzzle, and as you said, the rest is like using every social media, XR, VR, merch, events. It goes
Hmm.
into education, museums, libraries, so it can be this very rich ecosystem. I'll say that media ecosystem, story worlds, and um, I personally, I'm really excited because I think I've been just talking to different groups and sort of soft prototyping a few things, and um, without saying too much, that's too.
Sure.
I think there is like a 3D system now that I'm sort of soft R&Ding that you'd use slightly different. You use different software for games, even now like AAA.
Mm,
I've been in a bunch in like a massive studio. Effects they are different and siloed,
mm,
and some proprietary studios have their own systems, but there is some overlap. And there's one system now that I think you could. We've kind of proven out. We've done some tests, and I've just worked with different folks that we've been like we have kind of a setup where you could use this 3D modeling system to
mm.
make a concept video for the film, which we're putting together. I've got a tiny initial, just very high overview demo on my Instagram page
Okay.
at Etana Jacobson. If anyone,
Mm. Well,
um,
I'll put a link in the show notes.
great, so check that out. And that was actually done with our friends like Sweetwater NEP who have that stage in Atlanta, but this was their stage in LA. But those are
Okay.
so they've been terrific friends for this process. And creatively, yeah, you could then take that and you have like a modeling system which you can plug into games. And so
Mm,
creatively, I think just very broadly, you want to maybe have like a 6 month runway before a studio level film comes out, or an effects
mm.
script, as close as you can get to a spectacle film, depending on budget and other factors.
Sure.
But then, yeah, you would ideally have, and this is the vision for One Mars, you would have Hayden Planetarian exhibits. You'd have actual
Yeah.
walkthroughs of environments where you're on the surface and you're feeling
Sure.
things. You're feeling the wind, you're feeling the gravity or the approximate.
Mm,
And then this is where we start to overlap with like visualization systems at NASA Goddard and
mm.
space training missions. So I think this is like a hugely exciting way to create in entertainment, media, STEM, and space sectors simultaneously. And
Yeah.
yeah, this is definitely its own episode or something.
So I just flashed back to a funny mixed, you could call a mixed media experience where these several movies have had their own popcorn buckets.
Yeah, the whole
It
thing. Right?
seems kind of silly to make that comparison, but in a way it taps into that shared experience thing
Yep.
where I imagine studios like it because it probably doesn't cost that much. Um,
Partnerships, yeah, that
yeah.
which is really the name of the game now. Like Wicked had about 450 brand partnerships. That might be like
Oh,
I don't know,
interesting.
I don't know if the record is, but that's
Sure.
pretty normal. Yeah.
Wow. So I'm thinking of now I'm not going out reading up on this every day, but what's occurring to me is several examples of platform crossovers that are not were not very well, maybe they were lucrative, but for me at least as a consumer they were not very appealing, like Darth AI powered Darth Vader in Fortnite. I mean, I have a big problem with Fortnite to begin with, but I don't see that serving a story function, obviously, and it's naive of me to suggest that was the purpose. But I wonder in navigating the in this case even more Hollywood bureaucracy and studio and business interests, how do you keep a focus on an actual storytelling function and not just how do we draw eyeballs to a subscription service and like because for example I was thinking for one Mars or Mars One, I'm sorry, imagine okay, imagine an MMORPG
Yeah.
that's launched when the movie trailer comes out, and
Yeah.
you can play in the game, and it builds backstory, and by the time you go into the movie theater, you've experienced the world, and then you have the problem of like, did you watch the streaming show before the Marvel movie came out? Do you know? But maybe there's a way to manage that. But
Yeah.
to me, that still has a big challenge of that story coherence over time and not just treating all these things like cash grabs and subscription sales. So how do you navigate that while you're pitching this sort of thing and trying to build stakeholder agreement?
Yeah, that's the magic question that everybody,
Mm,
all groups now are sort of organizing these verticals, and
mm,
a lot of them are owned by telecoms. And I think
mm,
step of the way, the idea is to preserve the magic and the creativity, the excitement, and as you said,
mm,
not just building pipe or just you know It's that balance between art and commerce that we
Yeah.
is so critical, and balance in
Hmm.
general. And like, I mean, for me, I'm a director. I am a feature film director first and foremost. I've worked as a AAA game writer. I love video
Hmm.
games, interactive. I love live theater and immersive experiences. Um,
Hmm.
but I guess it's just so important to me that there's nothing like the magic of getting into a cinema. And I was really proud. My current film, Advanced Chemistry, did get a
Hmm.
theatrical release, which is very hard for any non-Marvel
Hmm.
film, any non uh,
Okay.
massive studio film. Now, so it's been in theaters. It'll be hopefully back in theaters and some festivals. And we just came back from Cannes, which was exciting.
Hmm.
Um, but I think at every step, you do your best to hang on to as much control, frankly, of the vision of the universe of the story that you can. And that's
Hmm.
the challenge that everybody has, every creative person has. No matter
Sure.
what. If you're just a novelist writing in a garret, when it comes time to publish it, you're going to have to make some compromises,
Yeah.
probably. Um,
Well,
actually,
and NASA itself has that problem where often missions end up with technologies that serve no function other than maintaining a research budget at a different center,
wow.
for example. And I've seen that personally, and it doesn't always end up reaching the launch pad that way, but those kinds of turf wars and turf holding can end up preventing projects from. It can kill a project that would otherwise have been really meaningful. So I suppose it's a universal thing across sectors that there's always going to be forces like that at
Yeah,
work.
yeah, but we are in a very unique time where it's like you're making just this, and we all know it, like between the vast spectacle films, which a lot of
Mm,
us like, personal emotional films, and I could give a million examples of each. Um, and we sought to get advanced chemistry in that sweet spot between like a fun,
mm,
slight, sweetly raunchy movie, but also like a classy, elevated Midsummer Night's Dream based on science. And I
mm,
believe we arrived at a good spot, and people are responding to it. But it's a compromise. Everything
yeah.
was ever made is a compromise.
Mm,
I've, I've heard Judd Apatow quoted as saying Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg that Superbad was exactly the movie they want to make. He was quoted in the New
wow.
York Times, which I, got my own questions about that, but saying those guys, and they were like very, very young when that got made. And I'm like, I'd be really interested. I'd love to ask them, um, like, was that in fact exactly how you guys saw it at 22 or whenever you got that made?
Mm,
Because almost anything ever made, there just has to be compromise. Um,
yeah.
and as
Yeah.
we space, that's also like that's something we're dealing with in the
Yeah.
project on Mars and in its media story worlds and its multiverse. But yeah,
Well.
there's like a multiverse modeling system which I'm really really pumped about, and there could be a way to model like theoretical physics. So like
Mm,
Max Planck's multiverses, like his 4 levels of multiverse and things like relativity. So
mm,
people might be able to actually experience, say, like the relativity. Like I'll just say this,
sure.
like there's a spin. Brian Greene, the physicist, has this
Mm,
space loaf concept that I've seen in episodes of Nova, and you could actually
mm,
enter and see how your own motion might affect space time. And
sure.
just for humanity to understand some of these things, it's like learning the Earth isn't flat. And I think,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I
So
like that. Oh,
yeah.
interesting.
So
Yeah.
I think this really, and this is where art pushes science and science pushes
Mm,
is truly like my passion, and I think it's people respond to it like that. This is where we really start like heating up, and part of why Interstellar remains so successful. And
yes.
they're like,
Well,
yeah,
Interstellar was such an interesting example of that because they got the really hard science right and the really easy science wrong. Um,
it's just
the launch vehicle stuff was nonsensical. They launched from Earth with this thing, this huge launch vehicle,
right.
and then they launched from I believe it was the water planet, with that had even much more gravity without it. But at the same time, they had world class physics of the black hole. So
Which,
you know,
which
so
so I had never realized that, Jeff. That's interesting because
mm,
I've seriously deep dove on that for a long
mm,
time. Um, Anyone I know who's connected to Kip Thorne in any way, I'm always
mm,
kind of, I think Jackie's been at a dinner with him or something, and I'm
sure,
some of the folks at Neil deGrasse Tyson's camp, some of his comedy co-hosts and stuff, and everyone's like, yeah, like obviously Kip wrote the treatment for interest. Not everybody does know this, in addition to getting an executive producer credit. So you've got those incredible quantum physics that make much sense, which Christopher Nolan did a great job of visualizing. But yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Like the gravity as they exit Miller's planet and stuff is like just nonsensical.
That bothered me. Now, again, it's a movie. I'm not the typical audience. I'm a real stickler for that kind of stuff, mostly because to me the more accurate the science, the more inspirational it is, because these things are so challenging to understand, communicate, explore, and then ultimately exploit for our own, human exploration. Now, getting back to the multi-platform stuff, I had this thought where, at the risk of saying, how's AI going to affect everything, which everyone asks in every article or every TV appearance now, but something did occur to me, which is I believe that Facebook is now testing things where influencers and celebrities will allow an agent to be made of them that will talk to people as them. So basically, you can create a chatbot of yourself as a celebrity or some influencer that will then talk to customers and users. And so it occurs to me that, as dystopian as that sounds, it occurs to me that in your universe that you're building, wouldn't it be interesting if when you buy their movie ticket, you get access to an app or something, or maybe it's not even an app, it's a real Instagram profile that you can interact with as a colonist on Mars or something like that, and really blur the lines between, social media is already sort of unreal to begin with, but I can imagine, and a lot of actual Instagram accounts with talking heads, a lot of those are synthetic or not real either. So I can imagine a world where there's yet a third or fourth category of agent in our everyday media consumption that is part of a film universe or a storytelling universe. So that would be an interesting way of engaging with people where they are and building up story investment, I imagine, building up emotional investment in a story before you see the movie.
I love it. You sound like a new media developer, a producer for sure, Jeff. Like I think this, and people do want to bring AI into every conversation. And I thought about it before we met today. Oh, look at that. Now, that's not
Yes, this is our co-host, Wednesday the cat.
Wednesday.
Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to the podcast. Yeah. I guess I was literally thinking, we're probably going to get into AI, and film isn't such an interesting. First of all, what you just said, tick, tick, tick. I think that's that.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's do it. Like these, avatar chatbots, whatever we want to call them, that become these agents interacting, as you said, a third or a fourth sphere, sector. With its own economy, its own dynamics, its own social engagement and investment, and those coming out. I think generally the thinking is, and I have different new media producers I'm working with on this. Incredible people, like multi-Emmy winners and just great people. But that is 6 months before the release of the film, which in an absolute dream world, if certain things worked out, would be late 2026. But we could when the first mission goes out during that window, because anyone who doesn't know, there's that window once every 18 months where you've got maximum alignment to Mars. But ideally you'd have then 6 months prior to that, you'd start with these long leads and kind of building up some of these communities and have planetarium experiences and live events, merch, and just, I see it as really generating this Apollo era level of excitement about space exploration. Love to think of it as the Artemis era. I know the Artemis mission has its own story at this point. It was going to be a mission, and now that's...
Well, literally today we're waiting for the budget to come out. The budget request, or maybe it was yesterday, but yeah. Yeah.
So, every single topic we're touching on is just literally a multiverse itself.
Yeah. Well, I really love the mention of Apollo because I think it's a great topic to sort of start to wind down on, because if you think about the media ecosystem then, it was three or four TV networks, Walter Cronkite, and newspapers, right? That was it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, you had some early experimental science fiction film, but I really don't think it was particularly well understood. You were 10 years less removed from Sputnik itself, which probably was the best multi-platform audience engagement experience in human history for science fiction. There's nothing quite like the first ever satellite flying over your head.
Right. And that we
For
were the Russians at that point.
Yeah,
That's the key why we do want to get out to
yeah,
stay.
for for a population that probably did not learn about much about astronomy in their public school education in the Great Depression,
Right.
in those years. So, that's a really interesting comparison to think about that media environment.
And we're not learning much about relativity now, just to jump in on that, because
Sure.
I just feel like this couldn't be more important for us to really grapple with, like, time being the fourth dimension and all the implications of, I think we all barely understand relativity. And when you start to, and with what happened obviously with like LIGO and M87 and like
Mm,
that has changed everything, and people, it isn't being talked about very much day by day.
that's a
It's,
really interesting. That's a really interesting point. I mean, we so now we're talking about education in general,
yeah, public,
and
and just yeah, just baseline,
and
the world's not flat, like understanding we're
yeah.
not.
Well, you mentioned maybe half an hour ago the moments of the inflection points of general knowledge, right? Eventually, all except for some communities, most humans recognize the Earth is not flat, and that has a profound impact on our world.
Right.
When we all rely on special relativity, we all rely on an understanding of special relativity, whether we know it or not, because without it, without that knowledge, our GPS satellites wouldn't work,
Right.
or at least our accuracy would be much lower.
Right. And
And
latest
so, and so,
Wi-Fi. Yeah.
oh yeah, I mean, and now we're kind of in this technological exponential curve where there's absolutely no way that education could keep up, because most of these subjects are very complex and probably not worth teaching every single person about.
But if we have visualization tools like this 3D
True.
modeling, and they can be
Yeah.
deployed across screens and have tactile feedback, we don't necessarily have to go to like a massive planetarium. These could be, things that everyone could have on their
True.
phone. And school kids, I think, could start understanding, and we all could start understanding. And even E equals MC squared was itself built on 200 years of other
Oh yeah.
Leibniz, and Emily de Chatelet, a female physicist,
Hmm.
was one of the key engineers of that equation. It didn't just start with Einstein. Nothing's ever really made in a bubble. So anyway, this
Yeah.
is for
Well,
me.
so again, that yet another topic that expands, kind of to fill the amount of time we would want to talk about it. I like the idea of teaching the sciences as sort of this stack of early human discoveries and all the way up to where we are now, and it's interesting to think about how other countries do this, because here we, don't really have federal education standardized, and so yet another ambitious component of your project to not just tell a coherent story across multiple platforms, but also include realistic, accurate education component. So now I'm thinking, imagine that as part of the social media component of this, for the younger users, they get, in their MMO tie-in, their kids on Mars, and they're getting taught what they need to know to survive.
Yep, yep,
I can imagine ways of doing that would be engaging and fun and building emotional investment in the story, right?
yep.
And for an age group that hasn't even been born yet, or maybe is 10 years old now, that will be a seamless thing for them. It won't be strange for them to get a movie ticket and then a link to a profile on Instagram,
Yeah, and then an
So
experience, an adventure, whether it's
yeah,
with TikTok, whether it's the Hayden Planetarium, whether it's just
yeah, yeah.
its own app. It's the applications and variations are pretty
Mhm.
limitless and exciting, thrilling, lucrative. So
Yeah,
We
well,
we
I'm
need
still thinking about Wicked having 450 brand partners. I mean, you could have kit.
endless. I mean, they
Yeah,
had everybody from, I think it might have been Porsche to Starbucks. There were Wicked drinks. I mean, that was,
wow.
yeah. And yeah, so this is, I think this is, we really are in like an exciting time. We can embrace it like that art commerce.
Yeah.
Still have, I've envisioned this as a beautifully crafted best picture, an interstellar opera,
Mm,
really based on accurate science, but with these thrilling science visualization sequences.
mm,
Definitely, whether it's adapting the actual VFX, or it's just building out like this 3D modeling system that we can take some of the story beats and characters.
yeah.
It's right in front of us. So
Yeah,
uh,
and with so many screens around us,
yeah,
there's probably never been a
never been better.
there's never been a better time to use the same tools across all of these channels, but also there's never been a better time to engage so many people on, everywhere they are, I think.
Yeah,
So,
they can customize it too. There'd be ways people can make their own toolkits, their own sandbox.
mm,
Even the display technology, this is the style fits the story. There's a group 6P I've been reaching out to, but they have a technology where you can see primary colors beyond what we usually see on all our display screens. Everything from
uh,
iPhone to like IMAX, they work within a certain uh,
uh,
latitudes. And so this is a way to go beyond that. So that's just one partner amongst many where we could really,
yeah,
this project can really show us not just a Mars we've never seen, but all sorts of things we've never seen, like a color palette we've never seen.
sure.
So it's and then
Yeah,
individuals will have a modeling system we can adapt for everything from like history, past, present, future, quantum physics. We can really just have some great adventures. Start this whole
yeah. I made something this morning that I will send you later, basically turning the text of a book into a timeline website and with an AI tool called Replit. It took me 10 minutes. It's insane. So I'll send you that just as another example of this. Um, I kind of want to get your kind of final thoughts, wrapping up our conversation on where we're going, where kind of creative storytelling in Hollywood is going, where people can stay in touch and stay updated on the project and so on. I think we'll definitely have to have another session. I'm particularly interested in the production technologies, but
yeah.
I finally remember what I was thinking. I grew up playing SimCity 2000, among other things,
Right.
and I see kids now playing Minecraft. And in my case, SimCity 2000 literally led me into a job at the city of Irvine, California. Like almost, I talked about it in my interview. That most people's story is probably not that literal, but I can't wait to see what people who grew up with Minecraft and its really kind of limitless creativity. I can't wait to see what the way they see the world. And I think that projects like yours and those shared worlds are going to be part of that. So, concluding thoughts. Where do you think about kind of the frontier of all of this stuff?
Yeah, really, the sky's not even the limit anymore because we're
Mm,
we're literally going through the skies and out to the furthest reaches of the known cosmos, and we're also going to our own fantastic voyage, micro journeys, and the
mm,
quantum world. And I think visualization systems and experiential systems, sensor-based systems, this is going to be it. I had the thrill to meet with Agnes Varda in Paris some time back.
mm,
Um, Up at Microsoft, just talking to some different game developers there about kind of sensor-based games and systems. Um, that wraps around to like XR, VR, and many other topics. But
mm,
Agnes, about 86 at the time, she was way ahead of the curve. For anyone who doesn't know, she's been like one of the seminal filmmakers of all time, but also kind of a pioneering female director. And she got everything, and she was really excited to kind of keep reaching out in every possible medium to tell stories and share experiences with people. So I think that's like, yeah, the sky's not the limit, maybe is our motto. And also as we
yeah.
go explore, like the tag of the movie right now that I have is "We came to change Mars. Mars is changing us," and that can be
Mm,
cool. It can be a little bit of suspense and horror. It can be exciting. So I think as we go out and explore different mediums and different environments, we really want to just be aware that they might have, and some do have their own systems, maybe their own sentience, and
mm.
just really be aware that like all bets are on right now.
Yeah. Well,
And
I love that thought that I mean that brings us back to space madness is that we going out there changes us, and we make changes out there so we can survive, but it also changes us. So I want to thank you for joining us today. This was a really interesting conversation. There's at least 3 episodes more we could talk about. I'd like to do that as the project progresses.
yeah,
Congratulations on advanced chemistry,
thank you.
and I look forward to staying in touch as we
Thank you.
go.
Who wants to track any of these projects, please do
Mm,
go to Instagram is the best place right now. Just Etana Jacobson on Instagram and Etana Jacobson with an O. And
okay.
that'll be in the show notes. And yeah, can't wait to just see you all out there.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thanks everyone for listening. See you next time.